Hello everybody, I am Eric Grenier of theWrit.ca and welcome to this special live stream of the New Brunswick by-elections where the polls have just closed in 3 ridings across the province. So I'll give you an idea of what we're going to be doing for the next hour or so. We'll see how this night is going to unfold. But there are 3 by-elections taking place, provincial by-elections in New Brunswick. The 3 ridings are Bathurst, East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore, Restigouche-Chaleur, and Dieppe. So we're going to be looking to see what's going to happen in those 3 by-elections as the results start to be compiled. You'll see above me here I have a map of New Brunswick. This is showing the results from the last election in 2020. This is from the website electionatlas.ca. This is a great resource, and there's a link in the show notes or in the notes to this, the description, so you can go check it out. And then over to my left, you can see the results from Elections New Brunswick, and this is what we're going to be watching throughout the night. So it'll probably take a little while before we first get our first results. The count will probably be pretty quick. And hello to everybody who is in the chat. The chat, you can provide some comments, some questions. You can discuss amongst yourselves, but I'll be responding to whatever questions or comments you have as well. So please take part in the chat, and we can talk politics throughout the night. So I'll give you a little idea of what we're looking at in terms of the 3 ridings. So these 3 ridings are all Liberal ridings. They're all ridings that have been held by the Liberals for several cycles, some of them for several decades. They were all won by pretty big margins in the last election in 2020, and the expectation, at least when these by-elections were called, was that the Liberals would win all 3 again. 2 of these ridings are very likely to stay with the Liberals, Restigouche-Chaleur and Dieppe. These are 2 ridings that are pretty safe for the Liberals. The candidates are good candidates for them to retain these ridings. They're heavily Francophone ridings. The Francophone vote in New Brunswick usually sticks with the Liberals. But then all eyes, I think, are going to be on Bathurst, East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore. This is because Susan Holt is the Liberal candidate. Susan Holt is the leader of the New Brunswick Liberals. She has been the leader since last August, but she does not have a seat in the legislature. This is her first opportunity to try to get a seat into the legislature so that she can go toe-to-toe with Blaine Higgs in Fredericton. Now, she is not from northern New Brunswick, which is where Bathurst East is located. She is from Fredericton, but she is running there to get a seat. Not an unusual thing for a party leader to do. What is making this one a little bit more of an interesting contest is Serge Brideau is running for the Greens. Now, he's pretty well known in New Brunswick, particularly among Francophone New Brunswick. He is part of a music group that is very popular. He's an activist. He's pretty present on a lot of different issues. He's been involved with the Société de l'Acadie de Nouveau-Brunswick. So he has a lot of profile in this part of the province, which is where he is from. And Susan Holt is not from there. So there is some speculation that the Greens could pull off an upset in Bathurst East. And that would be a huge upset historically, because this is a riding that has tended to be pretty safe for the Liberals, but also just an upset because it would mean that the Liberals would again have a leader without a seat in the legislature and not a lot of prospects for getting one in the near future. And that would open up a lot of conversations about the future of the New Brunswick Liberals and Susan Holt as leader of the party. So I'm going to just take a look at what we've got so far from Elections New Brunswick. We're still waiting for the first results to come in. It is automated in New Brunswick, so once they do start coming in, it should be pretty quick. But let's take a look at the map, and I'll show you where we are in the province. So the 3 ridings we're talking about, the first one here is in around Moncton. This is Dieppe. Dieppe was won by the Liberals with about 60% of the vote last time. Roger Melanson was able to win it for the Liberals. He has held that seat since 2010. So this was a long time for him to hold that seat. And you can see the PC's Patricia Arsenault, when she ran for them last time, had 22% of the vote. So this was a big margin, not a big expectation that the Liberals would lose a seat like Dieppe. The other seats we're looking at are both in northern New Brunswick. So we have Restigouche-Chaleur, which is here, which is north and west of the city of Bathurst. It includes some polls that would be sort of suburban Bathurst, not that Bathurst is a metropolitan area or anything like that. This was won by Daniel Guittard with 56% of the vote last time. The Greens finished second here in 2020 with 28% of the vote, and Guittard has held this seat since 2014. So again, these are 2 ridings, Dieppe and Restigouche-Chaleur, that are traditionally Liberal. You'd expect them to stay Liberal. That is the expectation tonight, and I think that's likely what's going to happen. The place to look at is going to be Bathurst East East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore, which, as you can see, is to the east of Bathurst. It includes some polls that are in the city of Bathurst itself, but it stretches out into the Acadian Peninsula where there are lots of Francophones. The riding itself, at least in the 2011 census, the last numbers for this riding that I could find, 67% have French as their mother tongue. And that is the lowest of these three ridings. Restigouche has 74% Francophones, and Dieppe is 72% Francophone. So these are normally seats the Liberals can count on. But it'll be really interesting to see what Serge Brideau of the Greens are going to be able to do, and if they are going to be able to pull off an upset. In the last election, they only got 12%. And you can see Denis Landry, he got 64%. This is a riding that he has held since 2003, and he was even first elected before that in the 1990s. So this was a riding that was a pretty strong seat for Denis Landry. And it was the expectation Susan Holt would be able to hold this without any trouble. But the fact that the Greens are putting this candidate, Serge Brideau, forward could upset things. The PCs are not running a candidate in Bathurst East, a sort of a leader's courtesy that we often see in other provinces and in New Brunswick itself. When a leader of the opposition is looking for a seat and doesn't have one, the governing party usually doesn't put up a candidate against them. So we're seeing that courtesy given here. But I actually think that courtesy could actually complicate things for Susan Holt, because it does mean that all of the PC vote that maybe just wants to defeat the Liberal leader can go to Serge Brideau instead. So that'll be one of the things to watch. Now, again, you can leave some comments in the chat, and we'll get to as many as I can. Pete Belliveau has the predictions. I think that the Liberals will hold Restigouche and Dieppe. I don't have much doubt about that. But this one, Bathurst East, it's going to be tough, I think, for Greens to topple a leader. The Liberals have been putting a lot of efforts into this riding, but it is a by-election. You never know. And when you have someone like Brideau who has a high profile, he's a local candidate, and you have a parachute candidate, Susan Holt, who does speak French. She is bilingual, but it is going to be a bit more of a challenge. So I'm not going to make a prediction for Bathurst East, because I think that one will be the one we'll be watching all night. We'll see how long we have to watch to see the results. So I'm going to leave the map up there just so you can get a little idea of what regions we're talking about. And I'll take a look for myself back at the results, waiting to see if we get anything coming in. We're still waiting for the first ones, which, again, usually what usually happens when we're talking about early on. So had some other questions. Kartoffelhunden, would Holt likely resign as leader if she loses? I would be surprised if she would resign after losing a by-election, but it will be tough for her after this, because these are three safe Liberal ridings. These are in Francophone New Brunswick, which they always count on as the bedrock of their support, the bedrock of any government that they can form. And if they do not have, their leader in the legislature, if they lose a seat that is historically a safe one for them, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be asking questions about Susan Holt's leadership. So winning the seat, even if it's close, will put all of that more or less to bed. But if she does not hold on to the seat, then there's going to be lots of questions. And there's no other vacancies right now in the legislature, so she doesn't have another opportunity to get a seat unless one of her other MLAs decides to resign to provide a vacancy. But Denis Landry won this with over 60% of the vote last time. There would be an expectation that your leader should hold that kind of seat. So would you have an MLA who won by maybe a smaller margin want to give up his or her seat and risk that the party loses it? It's going to be a tough one, I think, for Susan Holt if she does not win this seat. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be the one that we're going to have to keep an eye on, assuming that the rest are go as expected. But it could be a tough one for the Liberals if she doesn't win it. A. Jackson asking, did any federal Liberals campaign for Susan Holt during the campaign? Curious if she's tried to stay away from the Fed Liberal brand. I'm not sure if any federal Liberals did campaign with her or not. But someone I was talking to was saying that they were hearing that they were getting some complaints about Justin Trudeau when they were door knocking. So it could be that there could be some discontent with the federal Liberal government, but this is a safe area for the federal Liberals as well. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. I think it would be more here. Just the fact that, Brideau is very well known, Susan Holt is a parachute candidate, and, that could be an opportunity for opposition to the Liberals to gather behind Brideau in the Greens, and also for just people who want to have a local voice that they recognize, someone that they know, they've seen in their community, they've seen on the news, on TV, and in the rock shows that he does, and want to see him as their representative. The Greens have done okay in northern New Brunswick in the last couple of elections, in part because a lot of the Francophones are not voting for the PCs, so it doesn't give a lot of options if you're not voting for the Liberals. One of the other little wrinkles I should add for Bathurst East is that Alex White is the interim NDP leader. The NDP leader doesn't do very well usually, or the NDP, but that could have an impact here. Okay, we got our first results in Bathurst East. So the first ones we do have Susan Holt with a pretty big lead of about 500 votes over Serge Brideau, and Alex White is further back with 107 votes. But one thing to be really aware of when we're looking at these results is that a lot of the voters are in the Bathurst area, which is not as strong of an area for the Liberals. It is still pretty strong, but it's not as strong as other parts of the riding. The part of the riding where Brideau is from, and near the Tracadie area, that is an area that could get a lot of good polls for the Greens. So that'll be something to watch. We can actually look at the map again. We can look at the poll-by-poll results in Bathurst East, and you can see that the Liberals did very well in the eastern part of the riding, which is near Tracadie, and that would be a place where Brideau would probably get a lot of support. But you can see that the PCs were able to win votes a little bit around Bathurst and in the northern part of the riding. They don't have a candidate to vote for, so are they going to vote for Brideau just to not vote for the Liberals? That'll be something to keep an eye on as well. So we'll take a look at the other one, see if we got some results. So in Restigouche-Chaleur, we already got a lot of the polls already counted, so that is going very, very quickly. And Marco LeBlanc is ahead with 1,350 votes, and he's ahead of the Greens, who have 752, and Bard-Lavigne of the PCs has 295, and the NDP's Alex Gagne has just 49 votes. So looks pretty good for Marco LeBlanc right now, and we got more than half of the votes counted. So that is going to be pretty easy, I think, for the Liberals to hold in Restigouche-Chaleur. And then in Dieppe, again, well, boy, we're almost done. This is going to be a really short night, actually. I thought this was going to take a little bit longer than this. We have Richard Losier, who has 2,424 votes against Chantal, Landry of the Greens, who is finishing second, and Dean Léonard with 298, and Cyprien Okana of the NDP with 96 votes. So that is a huge win for the Liberals in Dieppe. Now, Losier was a well-known candidate. He is very active in the healthcare sector in the area, and so not surprising that he would go take it by such a big margin there. So it looks like the Liberals will win in Dieppe. There's only the special ballot left to be counted, so this is going extremely fast. In Bathurst East, we still got about half the votes counted. Now it's getting a little bit closer. We got Holt with 1,640 votes. Serge Brideau is now at 902, and Alex White is at 193. So it does seem like this is going to be a good chance for the Liberals to win this. Serge Brideau not right now getting close enough to win it. They don't have percentages here, and I understand things better in percentages. So let's see where they all stand right now. So Susan Holt is at about 60% of the vote right now. So she is doing actually really, really well. The Liberals got 64% the last time. So that is not, she's not undershooting things. Brideau right now, with where he is, he's at 33% of the vote. So he is right now garnering all of the PC vote and all of the Green vote, because combined they had about 36%. So he's getting all of that vote, but it's not enough. We'll see if some of these polls are going to be coming from the Tracadie area. That might be able to help him a bit. Just as you know, I'm using my trusty old calculator, which I looked up, I think is almost from the 90s, maybe even the 80s. But anyway, so we do have some updates here. Serge Brideau is now at 1,080 votes, which puts him at about 34%, and Susan Holt is at 59%. So it does look like this is going to be a pretty short night just in terms of the count, but also that there's not much doubt here that Susan Holt is going to win this. There's only three ordinary polls waiting to be counted, one of the special ballots, so it would be tough for Brideau to overcome that mark. Restigouche-Chaleur, we still got a lot more votes to count. They're only halfway through the ordinary polls. But again, Marco LeBlanc has about 1,400 votes, which puts him at 54%. So he looks like he will win that. But what's interesting to look at, and we'll go over the results a bit more closely once the count is done. We can go through it a bit more, less feverishly than I'm doing right now. And I can get to some of your questions too, because this is coming in a lot faster. This is the fastest I've seen for a by-election. But you can see that in Restigouche-Chaleur, the Greens are in second. In Bathurst East, the Greens are in second. The PCs don't have a candidate. And in Dieppe, the Greens are also in second. So, that is not a bad performance for the Greens because they only finished in second in Restigouche last time. So they're doing a little bit better than that. But yeah, we're very close to the end in Dieppe. There's only the special ballot waiting to be counted. And in Bathurst East, we've still got 2 ordinary polls and 1 special poll still to be counted. So it looks like that is not going to be that challenging for Susan Holt. In the end, there was talk that she would have a bit of trouble, but she's at 59% of the vote, which is down, about 5 points from the last election. So it's not a terrific result in that sense, but 59% versus 64%, I think that they'll be happy to take that. So I'll take a quick look at some of your questions here. So you have questions about the map. I haven't had a chance to really look at the provincial map closely, but it does seem like it's going to be somewhat contentious, especially, I think, for the Green leader having his riding cracked in half. Well, there's asking about predictions about how the New Democrats will do. Well, we don't really need predictions anymore, right? Yeah, Dylan McGuire, we surprised at all that the Greens are in second in all of the ridings. It's not a surprise that they're in Bathurst East, not really surprising in Restigouche because they were second last time, but they are second in Dieppe, which is an improvement because they finished 7 points behind the PCs last time, and now they're ahead by a little bit. So we got almost full results now in Dieppe, just that special ballot still has to go. And we're getting closer to completion in Restigouche-Chaleur. There's still 5 ordinary polls to count, but again, it is still pretty early. Bathurst East, though, that one looks... We're going to have to wait and see if it gets a little bit closer, because again, if those ordinary polls that we're seeing are in an area that could be better for Brideau, then that could, decrease that margin a little bit. But the gap right now is at about 850 votes or so, 860 votes. And, those last 2 polls are probably not going to have enough for Brideau to win it. So, it does look like the Liberals are going to hold all 3 of them. But it'll be interesting once we get all of the full results. We can dive in a little bit more into the numbers. Dieppe is the closest to being finished, so let's take a look at that. So we got Richard Losier, who has 2,424 votes, which gives him about 70%. So that is a big result for the Liberals in Dieppe because they only had 60% of the vote last time. So they're up 10 points from where they were in 2020. So that is a very strong result right there for the Liberals. For Chantal Landry of the Green, she's at 651 votes, which puts her at 19%. So that is up 4 points from the last election. But that's not too bad for the Greens to be there. I'm fighting off my cat. She's trying to jump on me right now, which would maybe mess up with some of the wires. We got Dean Leonard, who has 298 votes for the PCs, which puts him at only 9%. So that is a bad result for the PCs in Dieppe. They had 22% of the vote last time, and now they're only at 8.6%. So that is a big drop for them. That's not great news for the PCs because Moncton is more of a battleground for the parties than Northern New Brunswick. And if the PCs are struggling in some of those Moncton area ridings, those are a couple seats that the Liberals would want to be able to pick up. So while, Dieppe might have a bit of a different profile at some of the other ridings in Moncton itself, the fact that you would have the PCs dropping by 10 points in Dieppe, if they lose 10 points throughout Moncton, then, that could be trouble. I'm still fighting off my cat here. So let's take a look again just to see if Bathurst East is getting any closer. We're getting really close now to the end. There's only one of the ordinary polls left to count. Alexander Hartig says, wondering my thoughts about looking at percentages in a by-election, that the turnout tends to be low. I actually think the percentages are the thing to look at. Because if you're looking at raw votes, you're mostly looking at turnout, right? Whereas if you're looking at the percentages, then you can get an idea. Because if the notion is that people who don't turn out to vote in a by-election, are they any different from the people who turn out in a general election but don't in a by-election? I mean, my thoughts would be that they probably aren't that different. So if you, unless you're in, a riding with some special cases, some special candidates, then you could have a case where, turnout and the local effect is going to be really important, that one party's voters go out, but then others don't. There, we got some final votes. Do we have final votes? I'm not sure where that came up. Bathurst East. No, sorry. But Bathurst East, anyway, anyway, the point being that I think percentages is actually the thing to look at, because it does allow you to compare one party's performance from one election to the next. Because, in a general election, you get a broader swath of the population that's going to go out and vote, and, you want to win over those people. In a by-election, you're still talking about a lot of the same population. It's just each party's base that is more interested in voting. If you're here, just pause for a second. All right. Looking just, at some of your questions. Yeah, kind of the potato. Yeah, it's in Moncton. Yeah, I know it is a much more francophone area, right? Because Dieppe is 72% is francophone, whereas the rest of Moncton would not be as strongly francophone or Acadian. But if the PCs are still able to get 23% of the vote in a francophone riding, that might be a lot of anglophones. But it does mean that they're losing a lot of that support, either among the francophones who lived in Dieppe or among the anglophones who don't want to go out and vote for the party. So if you see the same thing happening in the rest of Moncton, where the francophones who live in Moncton but not in Dieppe, or the anglophones who live in Dieppe, or who are like the ones who live in Dieppe, if they're dropping the PCs by 10 points in those ridings, so they go from, winning from 45 down to 35, then that becomes a potential big issue for the PCs. Canadian Alex, why did the PCs outperform the two earlier by-elections, despite being further behind in the polls? There was a couple of factors that were probably playing into that one. One being the presence of the People's Alliance having been subsumed into the PCs when Chris Austin more or less destroyed his party and crossed the floor with the other MLA to join the PCs. And then the People's Alliance, I think, I can't recall if they were able to run any candidates there, but the party is not what it was before. The last poll had them at just 2%. So I think the PCs were able to get a lot of that People's Alliance vote, and that I think helped them a lot in those by-elections that took place. I think it was last year. All right, so looking at Bathurst East, Susan Holt is holding a pretty good lead over Brideau, about 918 votes. There's one more poll, so it looks like she's going to win this. There's really no chance that one poll is going to overcome that. So she's at 59% of the vote, and Brideau is ending up right now. He is right now at about 34% of the vote. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. I couldn't recall if they had managed to find candidates pizza asking. Yeah, but I think what had happened with the People's Alliance is that they had more or less become a fringe party again because they were no longer a party that that was really competitive anymore. They had dropped a huge amount of the polls before Chris Austin had made that move to cross the floor to the PCs, but they have not recovered. It seems like that really put a nail in the coffin for that party because they are really struggling in the polls since then. So I think that helped with the PCs in their last one. But I think that the things that the PCs have done when it comes to French language over the last little while, they raised the potential of changing the education system there. I think that probably hurt them quite a bit among francophones, and we're seeing that here, right? Because let's go to Restigouche-Chaleur, where the PCs are right now with 17% of the vote, which is actually matching what they had last time. So at least in this one, it doesn't seem that their support is being hurt in Restigouche-Chaleur. It's not getting any better. In last election, they did quite poorly in Francophone New Brunswick. But in Restigouche-Chaleur, their numbers are more or less holding. But in Dieppe, they are down. Sorry, I have to do these calculations here because Elections New Brunswick isn't providing percentages. But yeah, they're at 8.5% of the vote, so they're down in Dieppe by about 14 points. So that's a big drop there. And then in Bathurst East, they don't have a candidate, so we don't know how they would have done. But yeah, we're waiting for that last poll in Bathurst East before we can get some final numbers. Restigouche-Chaleur, we still got 3 ordinary polls still to come. So we're going to look to see what happens there. And in Dieppe, we're all done. All right, so why don't I write down some numbers here so that will help me. So for Dieppe, we're now at, Dieppe, we got final results, and the Liberals are ending up with 2,424 votes, putting them at 69.9% of the vote. So they're very close to getting to 70%. Now that is a jump of just over 9.5 points for the Liberals in Dieppe. So for the Greens, they're ending up with 651 votes, or 18.8%. So 18.8 puts them up by about 3.5 points. So that's a good jump for them. And for the PCs, as I mentioned before, they have dropped now to 8.6, which puts them down, about 14 points. And then the NDP also had a candidate here. They only got 96 votes, and that gives them just 2.8% of the vote, which matches what they had last time. So Dieppe is not having that, Dieppe for the NDP not having much of an impact. But we're seeing a drop for the PCs, and it seems that a lot of that went to the Liberals, but some of that also went to the Greens in Dieppe. So Dieppe is done. Kaibash asks, where's the language line in New Brunswick, where it changes from French to English and vice versa? Here, I'll show you on the map. You can almost kind of see it here. It's kind of a swath across the province that goes like around here. A diagonal from, the tip, this part of where it touches New Brunswick, Nova Scotia up to here. And you can see that the other parties are winning that. We can actually see this linguistic line in past elections. This is 2018, 2014. You see the same kind of thing where it's these ridings in the north. 2010, the PCs actually made a bit of a breakthrough. But this was during the, earlier on when the linguistic divides were starting to break down. 1999, Bernard Lord. 95 was the Liberals just dominating. There was also 1987 where they won all of them. But if you go back like really far into history, here, this is in the 1930s, you can see that it was always these top ridings in northern New Brunswick which stuck with the Liberals, and the ridings in southern New Brunswick which went to the PCs or the Conservatives. So that linguistic line, that linguistic divide in New Brunswick is pretty strong when it comes to the politics. We think about it when we think of the language deciding vote, usually think about Quebec with Anglophones voting for the Liberals, but in New Brunswick you also have this long history of this as well. So let's get back to some of the results. I'm going to pull this up. So I was at Dieppe. So Richard Losier is going to be the next MLA. A Liberal's holding that riding. Not much of a surprise there. Turnout was at 31%, which is not terrific, but for a by-election, it's not bad. All right, so let's look at Bathurst East. We're still waiting on some results there. And Restigouche-Chaleur, we're also still waiting for some results. So we're waiting for that last poll right now in Bathurst East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore. And it does look like this is going to be a pretty big win for the Liberals and Susan Holt. So any concern that she was going to not get into the legislature seems to have been a bit premature. The Greens look like they're going to get a decent result, quite a bit more of the vote than they had last time, but it's not really that much of a challenge here. Turnout seems to have been really bad. I'm not sure. For by-elections, if you get somewhere between 35, 45, that's not too bad for a by-election. Once you get into the 20s, that's pretty low. There has been somewhere it's in the 10s. That's really bad. It's rare that you have a by-election with majority turnout. So the fact that you have 35% right now turnout in Bathurst East, it's going to get a little bit higher as more of the votes counted. That's not awful. Restigouche-Chaleur, it's at 39%, so that's pretty good actually. They're going to get over 40% once the counting's done. Dieppe is at 31%. Yeah, I find you often kind of see this, not always, but often you see that in urban ridings, especially for by-elections, it's harder to get people interested in voting. It's harder to get them out to vote. And so the turnout tends to be a bit lower in urban ridings. Whereas in rural ridings, like Bathurst East and Restigouche-Chaleur, the local kind of a factor is more important and more people will be more likely to vote. The turnout, obviously we'd prefer to see higher turnout, but it's still not too bad for a by-election. If you were watching the by-election special I did for Hamilton Centre, can't recall what the turnout was there, but it was not good. It was not good. We're still waiting to get some more results here. So far we can make some broad conclusions. One, the Liberal vote seems to have been holding up pretty well, but they're up in Dieppe. In Restigouche-Chaleur, how are they doing? They're at 56%. So they're matching what they did last time. So once we average it out, we're probably going to get more or less the exact same result for the Liberals in these three ridings as they did last time. Last time they averaged 60%. So it looks like they're going to average somewhere around 60% this time. 21.97% turnout in Hamilton Centre. Right, that's right. That's not great. But anyway, so it looks like for the Liberals, they're holding their vote. I don't think that's particularly good for the Liberals. They need to increase their vote because they lost the last election. They got, just looking back, they got 34% of the vote last time. So they need to be doing better. Now, these are ridings where they just be running up the results in seats that they should have won anyway. But, they do need to be showing some progress. They're not showing a lot of progress here. Now, for the PCs, in Bathurst East, they don't have a candidate, so we can't assess how they would have done had they had a candidate. In Restigouche-Chaleur, they're now at, so they had 16.7% of the vote last time, and right now they're at 16.5%. So their vote is holding there. It's in Dieppe where they've dropped quite a bit. So that's a bit of a mixed bag. For the PCs, I guess on average, they're going to be down from last time. So that's not great, but they can afford to lose support in Francophone New Brunswick because they don't have really any seats there. So it's not a huge problem for them. The PCs are much more popular in Southern New Brunswick and Anglophone New Brunswick. And the Liberals run up their numbers too much in Northern New Brunswick if we're talking about vote efficiency. The PCs can probably win a majority government, even if they're behind by several points. Across the province. It could be as much as 8 or 9 points. They could still squeak out a majority win, or at least the most seats. So for the PCs, if they're down just a few points, that's still probably winning territory for them. Like I said, though, dropping in Dieppe, if it is a signal at all that they're going to be dropping in Moncton as a whole, we can't assume that, but it isn't great, then that could be a bit of a problem for them. Pizza is saying if Serge Brideau wants to run again, he could run in the next election. And Susan Holt is probably going to run in Fredericton, where she's from. Although, once in a while you do see the leaders, if they get elected in a riding in a by-election, they stay in that riding. Jagmeet Singh, federal leader of the NDP, he's from Brampton. That's where he held a seat in the Ontario legislature. He won his riding in a by-election in Burnaby South, and he is still the MP for Burnaby South. He ran there in the last 2 elections. So, it's possible that Susan Holt could decide to run here again. But, if the Liberals need to pick up seats in Fredericton, which they need to do in order to form a government, it might help to have your leader there. And if she fails to win, well, maybe it solves the problem. Kiabash, if I had to guess, do I see Blaine Higgs winning the next election? If I had to guess, I think that, if we're looking at what was the last poll in the province. So the last poll had the PCs at 37%, the Liberals at 35%, the Greens at 17%, the NDP at 9%. This is from Narrative Research. This was back in February. The Liberals were leading in the north. They were leading in Moncton by a little bit, and they were behind by in southern New Brunswick. I think that the PCs could still win because they have that vote efficiency. And we're not really seeing any indication, at least in the polling, that the Liberals are doing a lot better in southern New Brunswick, so that they can pick up a couple seats in St. John, they can pick up seats in Fredericton. Not seeing that in Moncton. So, if I had to guess right now, I'd say that the PCs would probably lose some seats, but they could still win another majority government, even if they lose the popular vote. Remember that Brian Gallant won the popular vote in 2018 and wasn't able to win the most seats. So, yeah, there is that chance that could happen. Here, wait, just give me a moment, please. All right, sorry about that. So I do think that the PCs have a good shot of winning the next election. And I would say right now, if I had to bet on who would win right now, I'd probably say it's like a 60-40 PC right now. I'd say that just based on some of that we haven't seen the Liberals take off in the polls and that the PCs have a big vote efficiency, so that they could probably still form a government even if they win 32, 33, 34% of the vote. So that's a big advantage that they have right now. So until we see the Liberals getting much further on, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. So we'll take a look to see where else. We're still waiting on that one poll in Restigouche-Chaleur to finish that off. And in Bathurst East, we do have final results in Bathurst East. Okay, so let's go through what those results were now. So in Bathurst East, we have turnout of 35%. Vivian Unger is saying, if Holt left Bathurst to run in Fredericton, that there could be a bit of a blowback there. The one thing I'd say, though, is that people probably understand that she's not necessarily going to run in Fredericton again. When Jagmeet Singh ran and in Bathurst East, he made the point that he would run again in Bathurst East. So, if you're elected under the understanding that you might not run again, then I don't think it's as bad. All right, so Susan Holt ends up with 63% of the vote, which is an increase or a bit of a decrease, because in the last election, the Liberals got 60%. So that is an increase of 3 percentage points. So not bad at all for the Liberals there. Brideau gets 37.9% of the vote, which is a really strong result for the Greens. The Greens got 12% last time. So they're up 25, 26 points in Bathurst East. So that includes some PC vote. It does seem like they were able to get a lot of that PC vote and a lot of their Green vote out as well. Alex White of the NDP, who was the interim leader, got 6.1 in that riding. So not a bad result, actually, for the NDP. They're not often over the 5% mark in New Brunswick. So we're starting to get some full results now. So we do have Susan Holt, who will be the next leader of the Liberals with a seat in the legislature. Obviously, she already is the leader, but this will make things a little bit easier for the Liberals now to have their leader in the legislature, which they didn't have last time. Kevin Vickers didn't have the chance to run in a by-election before the 2020 election. So that was something that was not helping the Liberals. But we have had a couple leaders. Brian Gallant also had to get a seat through a by-election. So we've seen this before in New Brunswick. All right, just going to just taking a look at some of your questions here. Oh, Kaibash asking about Richard Hatfield. Yeah, I've read Jacques Poitras' book on The Right Fight, which is about Bernard Lord, but it's also largely about the PC conservative attempts to appeal to francophones in New Brunswick. And it's a very good book, but I am going to try to get myself a biography of Richard Hatfield. I think that sounds like an interesting read. Okay, so we have full results in Bathurst East. Susan Holt wins with 63% of the vote. Serge Brideau finishes second with 38%. Very strong result for the Greens. I'd have to go through the map, but this probably be, probably their fourth best riding based on what happened in the last election. Let's see where they finished second. They finished second in Caraquet. They only got 16%. They finished second in Restigouche-Chaleur. They got 28%. They finished second in Restigouche-West. They got 22%. And then you look at some of these other ones, Fredericton, York, New Maryland, Sunbury, Fredericton North, and Albert, and Shediac. So yeah, this result is their best result in a riding they don't currently hold. So that's an interesting result there for the Greens in Bathurst East. Okay, and Restigouche-Chaleur, we're still waiting on that one poll to see just what the final results will be. And then we can make some final kind of assessments of how things ended up here. But yeah, this is a good result for the Liberals. Now, we did expect at the beginning that the Liberals would hold all three of these seats. These are three safe ridings for the Liberals historically, and as we've seen from the results in Restigouche-Chaleur and in Dieppe, no problem with the Liberals holding it. The question was whether the Liberals would be in any danger in Bathurst, East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore, because of Serge Brideau running for the Greens. He's well known. He's a musician. He is an activist. He's been involved with the Société de l'Acadie de New Brunswick, and is well known in the communities from the area. And he did do well. If this was some no-name candidate we had never heard of that ended up with 38% of the vote, we'd say that's a pretty good result. But it wasn't enough. We didn't see the Liberal vote come down. And if the Liberal vote wasn't going to come down after they got 60% last time, then there's no chance that anybody else was going to win it. So that's a good result for them. The Greens finishing second throughout the area, throughout all three ridings. Now, one of them, as I said, Bathurst East, they didn't have a candidate there, but the PCs didn't have a candidate. But they jumped ahead of the Greens, the PCs in Dieppe, and they had a very strong result in Bathurst East. So I think for the Green Party, they can be pretty happy with these results so far. And this could be a sign, and we've seen it in some of the polling, that the Greens could be the second party in Francophone New Brunswick right now. They're running up against a bit of a wall with the Liberals, who historically have a lot of support among Francophones, but it does have some promise for the Greens that they're not quite out of the running just yet. The last poll we did see had them at 17% across the province. They're at 15% in the north and 17% in Moncton. So, they are still holding a lot of the vote that they got in the last election. So we're still waiting on those last results in Restigouche-Chaleur. That's what we'll wait for, I think, before we close shop here for the night. For the PCs, like I said, this was a good result for them. It wasn't a good result for them, I should say. And there we got our final results. I'll finish my thought. The PCs held their vote in Restigouche. They dropped in Dieppe. Overall, that's not great, but it's not disaster, I don't think. All right, so in Dieppe, or sorry, in Restigouche-Chaleur, we have LeBlanc of the Liberals, who's finishing with 2,462 votes, which is 57.4% of the vote. We have the Greens finishing second here. Again, Rachel Boudreau gets 1,541 votes, or 35.6%. That's a very good result. Is that correct? Did I do that right? No, that's right. All right, well, that's a strong result for the Greens. And Bard-Lavigne, she finishes with 17 or 18% of the vote. And then we have Alex Gagne from the NDP with 95 votes, who finishes with 2.2. All right. Now I can continue to do some math. This is, I'm sure, great television or live streaming. So if we add up the three for the Liberals, they have averaged 63% of the vote across these three ridings. So this is an increase of 3 points over the last election, which isn't a huge result, but it's an extra 3 points. And when you're the opposition party, if you're picking up votes in a by-election, that's not too bad. Governments usually get punished, but you can also get punished, especially in fortress kind of stronghold ridings, if your vote doesn't come out. And it's true, Pizza, that the Greens did have a good result in Restigouche-Chaleur last time. They were at 28% of the vote. They finished second. Okay, so let's look at the average results for the PCs. Now, we can only do it in the two ridings that they had a candidate, so that reduces our ability to do this a little bit. But in those two ridings, they end up with 13% of the vote. And in the two ridings last time, they had 19%. So the PCs are down 6 points in those two ridings on average. That's not terrific for them. It is in Francophone New Brunswick where they don't have a lot of opportunities, but in some of these ridings where they hold the seat, but there is a not insignificant number of Francophones. If their vote that they did have in those ridings is dropping, then that could tip them over. And if we did see in Dieppe that some of the Anglophone vote that would normally be on their side did not come out to vote, did not feel motivated to vote, or voted for someone else, then obviously that would be a bad sign for them. And then for the Greens, we have them with, I think, a pretty good result when it's all said and done. They're over 30% in two ridings, and they end up with 31% of the vote across these three. So across the three, that's an increase of 13 points over the last election, so that's a big jump. Now, if we just take out the one where the PCs didn't have a candidate, which kind of, changed things a little bit, they're still up pretty good because they did well in Restigouche-Chaleur and they did well in Dieppe. So if we're looking at those two ridings, they're averaging 27. That's up 6 points. So we do see that the Liberals increased their vote a little bit. The Greens increased their vote by quite a bit, whether or not we're taking into account the fact that there was no candidate in Bathurst East, and the PCs dropped. So I think that is really the story of the night, I guess. The Liberals win those three seats. Now let's do a last kind of go around here. And if you have any questions, some last questions here, you can get them in now because results are in. I've used my calculator to do some math. So that's pretty much it for the night. This is a pretty short one. Some of these are very long. It'll be interesting to see once we have some federal by-elections. There's 5 vacancies right now. There's going to be a 6th once Aaron O'Toole actually resigns. So we'll have definitely some fun by-election nights for the federal level. So we're going to go around the horn. Restigouche-Chaleur, LeBlanc of the Liberals. He wins that by a very healthy margin of nearly, somewhere around 900 votes, 39% turnout in the riding, and he wins that by a margin of about 22 percentage points over Rachel Boudreau of the Greens. She takes 36%, a very strong result for them. They had about 20. They were, below 30% in the last election, so this is a jump. We'll go to Bathurst East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore. Turnout was about 35%, so not too bad, not terrific, but not awful. You have the Liberals, Susan Holt, who will be the next MLA for Bathurst, East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore, with a pretty significant win, 63% of the vote. That's a margin of about 25 points over Serge Brideau of the Greens. And he was a high-profile candidate, very well known in the area, activist, musician, and he increases the Green score, but doesn't really put a dent in where the Liberals were. And then finally in Dieppe, Richard Losier wins with a pretty commanding 70% of the vote in the turnout, which was only 31%. That's the lowest turnout of these three by-elections. Chantal Landry of the Greens finishes second with 19%. So we have 3 Liberal wins, 3 Green second places, 2 PC second places, third places because they didn't run in Bathurst East, and the NDP, doesn't do terrific in either Dieppe or Bathurst East, where they had a candidate, but the NDP struggles in New Brunswick in general. All right, going to just finish off, I think, with some of your questions here. And also, if you have any, I was planning on going at least until the end, until 8 o'clock. So if you have any federal or other provincial questions we can talk about, I'd be happy to chat about it. Eliza Palace, talking about the NDP. The NDP used to be not too bad in, that part of New Brunswick here. Like if we look at second place finishes, okay? So in second place finishes, you can see in this corner with the Acadian Peninsula and Baie-des-Chaleurs. By the way, I was born just around here, just north on the Quebec side there in the Gaspé. So the Greens, finishing second, the PC's second in a couple of these ridings. Go to 2018. The NDP finished second in Bathurst East-Nepisiguit-Saint-Isidore. Jean-Maurice Landry, there was a Landry versus a Landry, so it's very Acadian. They finished second in Bathurst East. Go to 2014, the NDP finished second in Restigouche-Chaleur. You go back to 2010, the NDP finished second in Tracadie-Sheila. That was Roger Duguay, who was the leader of the NDP in 2010. So there is a history of the New Democrats in this area. Yvon Godin was the NDP MP for I can't remember what the name of the riding was, Acadie Bathurst, I think it was. That's also the hockey team name, so I might be mixing up the two. But there is that history there. So I think we are seeing a lot of that kind of vote that is not willing to go to the PCs, but also not willing to go to the Liberals in these Francophone parts of New Brunswick have been going to the Greens. And I think that's one of the areas where the NDP has taken a bit of a hit. Alexander Hartig, thoughts on fixed by-election dates? I love this idea. This was my pet idea. Here's my pitch. By-elections should be held on the same day that a general election is held each year. So let's say in federal. Federal, I think the federal election is held on the third Monday of every October, every 4 years. So we should hold our by-elections on the third Monday of every October every year, so that you save them all up. It does mean that some ridings would have a vacancy for longer than 6 months, which is currently the limit. But you save up all the by-elections and you have a big by-election night, big by-election day. It might be in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ridings across the country. You do the same thing in each province. And that way you get people used to the notion that October's for voting. October's for voting. You do election night specials on TV. You get people more interested, more engaged in elections and politics. This is how you get people interested in the important stuff, policy and governing. You got to get people into the door. If we hold these by-elections, there's probably going to be the federal by-elections. They'll probably hold them in July or something because of how the timing is going to work out. Or sometimes you hold one by-election and then you have one later on in the year. Have them all happen on the same day every year, and we get kind of into the habit of voting in October or in September. New Brunswick's elections are in September. You just get that instilled that this is the time that we have our elections. The United States does it with their congressional elections. They have them every 2 years. And they're always in November, and then they have special elections that are usually held in around the same time. like, we should get into that. Not in the sense that we should have an election every 2 years. I don't think that's good. But we should have a regular cadence to it so that people will have a little bit more knowledge that a by-election is coming around the corner, rather than these randomly thrown about by-elections where you get all over the calendar. That's my pitch. Fixed by-election dates. Love it. Scott Gillard, yes, a by-election in Preston. I don't think the date has been called yet, but if it has been, you can let me know. There's a couple by-elections we're going to have across the country. There's the federal ones. We're going to have some in Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario for the federal. We have 3 vacancies, I believe, right now in Saskatchewan, 2 in Regina, and 1 in the rural areas at the provincial level. There's by-election that has to take place in British Columbia provincially, at least 1. There's one more, at least there's 2 more that's coming in Ontario, 1 in Kitchener, 1 in Canada. And yeah, I think that's it for the by-elections we have. So we got quite a few coming up. So I think that's going to be interesting to look at. Nice pass. Holt only got 59%. Total on top left doesn't match. Well, let me take a look. So, here, I'll do the math by hand here. 3981. Oh, you're right. There's a few more votes there. 3981. Yeah, she gets 59%, which is what I had her at earlier. All right, so she only got 59%. So not as great for the Liberals then. They're going to end up being a little bit further down. So I think when you add it all in, the Liberals are probably more or less treading water. So if they're at 58.9% in the one riding, I guess everybody's going to be, I'd have to redo everybody's. So we had 62% for the Liberals across the 3 ridings, so they end up jumping 2 points. So there you go. Benjamin, the Saskatchewan and Citrix poll, yeah, that was an interesting one. Had the Sask party at 46% and the NDP at 37%, I believe, and the NDP leading in Regina and Saskatoon. It's pretty interesting. Sometimes the NDP in Saskatchewan does better between elections and in the polls, so maybe that's what's happening there. We'll see if it can hold. They only have an election next fall, 2 falls from now, so lots of time for things to move around, but, you know, not every dynasty lasts forever. Yeah, Langford won to Fuca to replace John Horgan, of course, and there was another MLA who resigned, an NDP MLA, I think, who was from the Vancouver area. So anyway, we do have some by-elections coming around. All right, so some of the math that I did was apparently not correct because it looks like Elections New Brunswick hasn't added things up correctly in terms of the ballots that have been counted in Bathurst East, but I think that we can say the overall view of this is that the Liberal vote held. The Liberal vote held across these 3 ridings. They did quite a bit better in Dieppe, which is a good news for them because if their vote goes up in the Moncton area in general, then they might be able to swing some seats. The candidate there was a good candidate, so maybe that helped a lot. But the Liberals were able to hold their vote, a good enough result, and Susan Holt gets her seat in the legislature, which is, of course, probably the biggest thing that they were looking for. The Greens finished second across all 3 ridings, a little bit of bragging rights for them. Some good results as well in Bathurst East and in Restigouche-Chaleur. And Dieppe, they were able to surpass the PCs. For the PCs, the vote held in Restigouche, but their vote dropped quite a bit in Dieppe. That would be a bigger concern, I think, for them because the Moncton area is a battleground and the PCs need to be competitive there. And yes, Dieppe is majority Francophone, but if their vote is dropping in the Moncton area, if we see similar kind of drops in other areas, even if it's half as big, if they drop 5 points in some of the other Moncton ridings, that could open up an opportunity for the Liberals. And then for the NDP, they actually ran candidates in 2 out of 3 ridings. Last time they only ran 1 out of 3, so that's an improvement for them. But they still have a long ways to go before they get back into relevance. So that's it for the New Brunswick by-election special. I appreciate you joining me for these three. I was expecting that they wouldn't be all that interesting, although then we started to hear that maybe Susan Holt might be in some trouble. Turns out that she wasn't, so they end up not being as groundbreaking maybe as they could have been. But that's why they play the games. That's why they cast the votes and hold the by-elections. I'm not sure what the next live stream will be. I'm thinking it'll probably be the Alberta election on May 29th, so that'll be a hell of a one to tune into. And for coverage of these results, I'll have a full analysis on the website in the Weekly Writ, which is for subscribers only, on Wednesday of these results in New Brunswick. I'll have coverage of the Alberta election that is going to be called on Monday. It's going to start on Monday. And that'll be something you want to check out at therit.ca. You should subscribe to this YouTube channel. I put out the podcast. I put out more of these live streams. And of course, visit the website, therit.ca. Subscriptions are the reason I can do this. One of the reasons I'm doing a thing like this, to have a whole night doing a special for New Brunswick provincial by-elections that are pretty much in the bag, and they were much more in the bag than we thought they could have been, is because this kind of independent political analysis, news coverage of what's happening here in Canada, in our politics, in our elections, is important, and it's not done enough, in my view. I don't think you could have found a by-election New Brunswick special anywhere else on TV tonight, or even on the internet, maybe. And I think it's important that this stuff is done. And we talk about our own politics. We're not just focusing on American politics, on politics in other countries that might seem more interesting. This stuff is important, and your support makes it possible. So subscribe to the YouTube at the very least. Subscribe to the rit.ca if you can. I would really appreciate your support. So thanks for joining me. It's been a bit of a quick hour. I wasn't expecting it to go that fast. And I'll see you again soon.